I had a 4 weeks breaks because of vacation and illness. But now I'm restarting the podcast series on decolonizing the mind with the 56th episode. And I want to go through the issues that I've been discussing in Venezuela. Um, Apart from the vacation and the illness which deprived me of my voice, after that I went to Venezuela, and on the way I stopped in Curacao to work with activists there who have been working for many years now. And in Venezuela I attended the Congress from 10 to 11th of September, organized by the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, an international conference on fascism, neo-fascism, and similar expressions. So the notion similar expression, I think, is a very clever addition to the discussion on fascism, because with this addition, it opens the door to go beyond the classical Marxist analysis of fascism in the context of capitalism. It now opens the door, as President Maduro did at the closing day of the conference, where he made a link between fascism and colonialism. Now, this presentation has a PowerPoint PDF, but I also wrote an article with quotes, with sources, and it's more elaborate than the PowerPoint presentation. You can download it on my website. If you go to articles, you will find this analysis of mine of fascism, neo-fascism, and similar expressions. So first I give an analysis of the fascism of Hitler. What were the basic characteristics? First was a strategy to crush the anti-fascist movement with the most brutal and violent means. Second was the explicit use of racism to justify their policies. Third was the conservative Christian foundation of his policy. Fourth is the virulent sexism and anti-LGBT policy. And probably the most important is waging war to colonize Eastern Europe. Now, crushing the anti-fascist movement in Europe at that time, in Germany, was obviously crushing the socialist and Marxist movement. And when fascists talk about crushing the anti-fascist movement, whether they are in government or in opposition, the main goal is to physically and organizationally demolish the anti-fascist movement. They built an infrastructure of paramilitary units to achieve this end, and when they are in government, they use the military apparatus. Then the explicit use of racism. Hitler used the concept of Übermensch and Untermensch. The Übermensch, the superior mensch, is a person of a biologically superior Aryan or Germanic master race. The Untermensch, the subhuman, is the inferior non-Aryan person. Mind you, he regarded the Jews and the Roma as part of the Untermensch, but the majority in his visions are the Slavs of Eastern Europe, the ethnic Poles, the Belarusian, the Czechs, the Ukrainians, the Serbs, the Russian, etc. So when he was talking about Untermensch, it was not just about the Jews. And then something that is often deleted in the analysis of Hitler is how Hitler specifically places hatred for Jews in the context of his Christian beliefs. In a speech in 1922, he said, my feeling as a Christian points me to my Lord and Savior as a fighter. In boundless love, as a Christian and as a man, I read through the passage which tells us how the Lord at last rose in his might and seized the scourge to drive out of the temple the brood of 5% of adders, and how terrific was his fight for the world against the Jewish poison. And when the Nazis took over in 1933 in government, Hitler declared that his national government regards Christianity as the foundation of our national morality. People don't like to be remembered of this, but Hitler's fascism was rooted in a deep belief in Christianity. And I say conservative Christianity because obviously there's also I'm sorry, liberation theology and progressive Christianity. So don't think that it is all Christianity is aligned to Hitler. That's not the case. And the fourth is virulent sexism and anti-LGBT policies. Women's role were confined to motherhood and the household in the vision of the Nazis and were excluded from public life. Homosexuals were persecuted, imprisoned, and killed. That's important because neo-fascism of today in Europe are pro-LGBT, pro-feminism, and even pro-Israel. Then the most important thing, in my view, was that the colonization of Eastern Europe. Hitler says, what India was for England, the territories of Russia will be for us. So he didn't start World War II to exterminate the Jews. He started the war to colonize Eastern Europe after the model of the British colonization of India. In my book, I give ample evidence of it, and also some of that is repeated in the article which I wrote. The first act of war was not against Western Europe, but against the East. On September 1, 1939, Hitler's army invaded Poland, not France, as the first step in colonizing Eastern Europe. And Hitler said, it should be possible for us to control this region to the east with 250,000 men plus a cadre of good administrators. Let's learn from the English who, with 250,000 men in all, including 50,000 soldiers, governed 400 million Indians. The space in Russia must always be dominated by Germans. The Russian space is our India. Like the English, we shall rule this empire with a handful of men. Again, Eurocentric historians about Hitler and Nazism and fascism don't tell you how Hitler looks at Britain as a model for his work and his ideology. Now, again, World War II was not primarily about Jews, because the idea of the Holocaust, the systematic extermination of Jews by Nazis, came about at the end of 1941 after the war started. Before 1941, Nazi policies toward the Jews was based on forcing them to emigrate from the Third Reich and not killing them in an industrial way. This policy entailed the expropriation of Jewish property, the introduction of laws to ban marriages between Jews and non-Jews, and occasionally the organization of violence, as in the case of the Kristallnacht on 10 November 1938, when a pogrom was organized during which windows of Jewish stores, buildings, and synagogues were destroyed. So the decision about the Holocaust was made after the war had started. And C. Browning, who did a very thorough study on the decision-making process, says the basic decision and the total clarity in implementing the genocide of European Jews emerged between mid-September and late October 1941. It was made after Hitler's army managed to cut off Leningrad on the northern front and capture Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, in September 1941. The prospect of a final victory looked bright, and the problem of what to do with the millions of Jews living in Eastern Europe, soon to be part of the Third Reich, was now on the agenda. Migration was not an option, so the idea of annihilation became a reality. And once the decision was taken, it was a matter of technicalities, and the technical solution was ultimately implemented, was the gas framework. Now, in the Marxist and Socialist movement, who were the major target of the fascist movement in Germany during the period of Hitler, in that movement it's understandable that they regard the fascist movement as the most reactionary and dangerous movement in world history. They regard fascism as a fundamental crisis of capitalism. But thinkers of the Global South have a different vision of fascism. They link fascism to colonialism, not to capitalism, but to colonialism, as in fact Hitler himself did, as I showed. Aimé Césaire, writing in 1955, reminded the Europeans that he has a Hitler inside him, that Hitler inhabits him, that Hitler is his demon, that if he rails against him, he is being inconsistent, and that at bottom, what he can't forgive Hitler for is not the crime in itself, the crime against man, it's not the humiliation of man as such, it's the crime against the white man, the humiliation of the white man, and the fact that he applied to Europe colonial procedures which until then had been reserved exclusively for the Arabs of Algeria, the coolies of India, and the blacks of Africa. 3 years earlier, Frans Fanon had echoed the same sentiment. He said, when I turn on, sorry, when I turn on my radio, when I hear that Negroes have been lynched in America, I say that we have been lied to. Hitler is not dead. When I turn on my radio, when I learn that Jews have been insulted, mistreated, persecuted, I say that we have been lied to. Hitler is not dead. And when finally I turn on my radio and hear that in Africa forced labor has been inaugurated and legalized, I say that we have certainly been lied to. Hitler is not dead. And Césaire and Fanon were referring to the crimes that Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and other European nations committed with the genocide of the indigenous people of Abya, the European enslavement, and the genocides committed in Africa and Asia by these powers. The whole system of segregation that was set up by the Nazis for oppressing the Jews was in place and fully functioning both before and after World War II in the European colonies, in South Africa, and in the United States. In Germany, there were signs, no dogs, no Jews allowed. These signs were put up by European colonizers in all the other places with their own variants. No dogs, no Asians, niggers, Africans allowed, etc. Across Britain, in the 1950s-1960s, private landlords often posted signs, no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. And in the United States, apartheid existed till long after the war, World War II. And the other thing is, the genocide of Namibia was the model for the Holocaust, because the means and methods used during the Holocaust were derived from an earlier genocide that the Germans committed against the Herero and Nama people in West Africa and Namibia in the early 20th centuries. In the process of colonization of West Africa, the German came against resistance of the indigenous population. The German emperor issued an extermination order, the Vernichtigingsbefehl, similar to what the Nazis would use in World War II to annihilate a whole ethnic group. Some 100,000 Herero and 10,000 Nama perished in a systematic campaign to hunt them down and kill them. Many also ended up in concentration camps similar to those used in World War II, but without the gas chambers. German doctors even conducted medical experiments on the prisoners. Now, let's go to neo-fascism. There are two types of neo-fascisms in Abya. Neo-fascism is the resurgence of fascism, but in many different ways. You can't just equate these forms with the fascist movement of Hitler. In Latin America, there are two types of neo-fascism. One type is based on the reactionary military establishment with ties to the old ruling class and especially strong ties with the American Empire. The US trains, funds, and supports these groups in any way possible. The immediate goals is to take state power through a coup d'etat and then crush the social movement. They use paramilitary organizations to intimidate social movements and break their leadership. The history of Latin America shows many examples of this type of fascism. Chile, Brazil, Argentina. The second type is the resurgence of extreme right movement that contests elections on the basis of popular support. Javier Milei in Argentina and Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil are examples of this movement. They thrive on ideological attacks on the program of the left and claim to do a better job in restructuring the economy and society with harsh measures. The peculiar thing about them is that they have mass support, not just from the old ruling class and Western imperialism, but they have been able to build a social base among poor people. They sent an important message to the progressive social movement in Latin America. Why have they not been able to erode the social base of the neo-fascists? The strength of the neo-fascists is also derived from the weakness of the progressive social movements. Look at neo-fascism in Europe. In Europe, the neo-fascists deviate in many aspects from classical Hitler fascism. The main resembler is the racist narrative, but it's not about Jews, it's about Islam. It brings the discussion on neo-fascism to the level of civilization. Western civilization versus Islamic civilization, not communism versus fascism. Jews and LGBT are part of Western civilization. Western civilization is about progress and rationalism. Women's liberation and LGBT emancipation are high on their agenda. They support the Jewish state of Israel unconditionally. They are against perpetual wars of the NATO alliance. They have an agenda for social reform of the working class. So this is very different from the classical fascism of Hitler. If you look at neo-fascism in the US, the thing is even more complex. The US is the leading military, political, and economic force of Western imperialism. With 800 military bases across the world, they have the power to engage in devastating wars, as they are now doing in Ukraine and Palestine. But if we look at the political forces that are engaged in fomenting war, we see that neo-fascists like Trump, who promote a racist narrative, are against endless wars, and the Democrats and mainstream Republicans, supported by the military-industrial complex, are in favor of these wars. So if you take the criterion of engaging in war, who is the fascist, Trump or Biden? Take neo-fascism in the global south, not only Latin America, but take India. In India, the Hindutva Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, Indian People's Party, led by Narendra Modi, is regarded as a neo-fascist party because of its Islamophobic policies and violent campaigns against Muslims. The ideological founder of Hindutva, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, connects the religion of Hinduism with the biological category of race. Savarkar says the Hindus are not merely the citizens of the Indian state because they are united not only by the bonds of the love they bear for a common motherland, but also by the bonds of a common blood. They are not only a nation but also a race, jati. But then, if you study BGP more closely, you find many intellectual journalists, political leaders who are very anti-colonial. If you watch videos by India's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Subramaniam Jaishankar, you will find a sharp critique of Western colonialism. There's even an author, Sai Deepak, who claims to work from a decolonial perspective in promoting basically the BGP narrative in his book called India That Is Bharat. So my conclusion is if you link fascism only to capitalism, you are not able to understand the complexities of neo-fascism. There's a civilizational dimension neo-fascism that's embedded in colonialism. Now, if you want to read more about this in my book, look in the index of Hitler, of BGP, or fascism. I have a chapter, a paragraph on fascism. The PowerPoint you can download at sandohir.com, and the article you could download at the same website. If you want to support the DTM channel, subscribe to it, share it with friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe. Get involved in discussion group and make a donation at sandohira.com. Thank you for your attention.